Welcome to Outdrive, folks. I'm your host, Cliff Callis, and each week I'm bringing you actionable marketing insights you can apply to reach, connect with, and convert rural American consumers. Outdrive is powered by Callis, a full-service advertising agency with a focus on marketing rural America. Callis offers a wide range of integrated marketing services, including website development, search engine marketing, social media, video, and digital. We develop strategic and creative campaigns to build your brand and your business, and you can learn more about us at ecallis.com. Now join me in the front seat as we head out on the road to success. Let's go. Hey folks, welcome to Outdrive. We've got another great story to share with you today about life and work in rural America. Meeting our guest that we have on the podcast today falls under the category of you never know. If you know me at all, you know that phrase is one of my favorites because in the life we lead, you never know what's going to happen each day. Recently, my family and I were visiting Disneyland, a place we had never been to but had always wanted to go. As a first-timer, we didn't know the ins and outs of visiting the parks, maximizing the limited time we had there, or maximizing the enjoyment. And that leads us to our guest today. Dr. Nicholas Harrison is a Canadian-born and raised author, actor, and Jedi. Nick, as he's known by his friends, has his Ph.D. and is a professional fight director, stunt performer, Disney aficionado, and more. You may have seen him in the Air Buds movies, heard him in Scooby-Doo, or experienced his talent in many other popular films and series. We met Nick in the line heading into Disney, and were enthralled by his insight into the Disney franchise, theme parks, and marketing. Nick led us on an adventure into Disney California Adventure Park, and even sat with us for our first ride on the fantastic Guardians of the Galaxy ride. Nick has actually performed at Disney, and we'll hear about that today as well. He's a talented performer, savvy marketer, and a really good guy, and we're excited to have him on our podcast today. Welcome to Outdrive, Nick.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. You know, you and I met a week ago at Disneyland, and as we visited, the thoughts going through my mind is you're going to make one heck of a good podcast guest. So I'm glad that you were interested to do that. I think we've got a lot to talk about today. I want to talk about the entertainment business some. I want to talk about Disney and specifically their marketing because I think they're really good at it. And then I want to get your take on rural America because that's what the focus of our podcast is all about. But before we go down those roads, how about just telling our audience a little bit about yourself?
Oh my goodness. Do you have 2 hours?
I sure do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've worked in the entertainment industry for probably 35 years. I have a PhD in film and theater history. I'm a professional actor and a voiceover artist. I did morning radio with the morning drive for about 20 some odd years as well, in addition to everything else. And I do a lot of corporate entertainment as well. So, as well as commercials. And I've done radio commercials, live action commercials, and I enjoy what I do. I used to work for Disney off and on. And I still do things for them from time to time. So I love that. And I love the fact that we met at the happiest place on earth. So that's in a nutshell who I am. And probably you have seen me without even knowing that you've seen me on TV. If you've watched shows, you've probably seen me a number of times.
And we have. So how was it that we just coincidentally stood next to you in line at Disneyland? How did that come to be?
I think it started when we were in the lounge, and I think I heard your daughter asking about the Incredicoaster and if it was going to be open that day. And I chimed in, and the concierge was looking it up, and I said, yes, it's going to be open today. And that started it. And I think then we all made our way out to the elevators, and we ended up in the queue to go through security. And then we just struck up a conversation from there. And I found out it had been your first visit to Disneyland. And I was giving you advice on where to go. And then you just said, hey, can we follow you? And I said, sure. And you did. So, and then we struck up some great conversations back then.
Yeah, I agree. And what a great experience that was. That was a great first time for us. So going back to the beginnings of time, so to speak, what was life like for you as a kid?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. I grew up in a small town where the population was 60,000. So a large, small town, but it was in the pulp mill environment. So my dad was a welder, my mom was a banker. So I grew up very blue collar as a kid. And I always loved the idea of entertainment and cartoons. I think the first cartoon I saw as a kid was Mighty Mouse. And I thought that was fantastic. That's
Here
right.
I come
Yes,
to save the day.
exactly right. And I enjoyed all that. So I'm a Gen Xer, and I grew up, with started without cable, so just a couple channels, but very drawn into this whole idea of that marketing at that time, which was more for the older generation. But I'm of that generation. We were like really influenced by it. And of course, because both of my parents worked, I would come home and the TV would be my companion. So I would watch things and I would, get drawn into a lot of commercial advertising, a lot of, commercials of the day, and the jingles and all those things that sort of stood out to me, and the logos. And that sort of, I think, shaped a lot of it. I also, on a side note, I had undergone a lot of, which is a topic for another time, but I went to a school where I underwent a lot of abuse. So I actually escaped a lot through fantasy and television to cope with what was happening at a private school that I'd gone to. So I really think it was the idea of the what like what television, what films could provide for me as a means of escape to get away from what was happening in my life at the time. And I think that really did heavily influence me to lead me on the path to becoming an actor and an entertainer and a writer, and I've enjoyed that. It's a lot of fun to, when I go to Disneyland, part of me is there to research and do work. And I love the fact that I really do have a Peter Pan job. I mean, I teach acting and entertainment and even marketing actors as part of my course at the university. So I get to play with what I love. It's my job. I love it.
So you like living the dream?
I think I am, you
What
know.
as you described for us all the different things that you're involved in and the different ways that you're able to utilize your talents, I'm like, this guy's doing everything that he wants to do. And I don't think there's a lot of people that can say that.
I think everyone can, and I think it's like I'm lucky in the sense that yes, on the one hand I had a really horrific childhood in terms of if I just focused on what was happening at that school, but I did have parents who really wanted to make a difference for me and worked hard. Watching my mom, and of course I wish she was still alive because you'd love to talk to her. She was a hilarious person. She worked her way up through the depression as a child, going into banking as a teller, and then got into management, and then became an executive with the bank. And so she worked at a time when it was very male dominated in the financial industry and banking. And she fought hard, and she also had a really wicked sense of humor. And I think that served her well to get her going through the different levels of her career to where she was one of the senior executives at a time when that was not too common for women to do. And as her son, and watching her do this and watching her tenacity and her drive, I think really inspired me to follow in those footsteps. And again, with my dad being a welder and a pipe fitter, and he was a World War II veteran. He was in the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion, and he was also a dual citizen from the US, from Mullen, Idaho. And that inspired me as well to see that drive of that generation, where if something was broken, you fixed it. You didn't just go out and get another one. And he knew how to remachine things and fix things. And he was kind of like an original version of MacGyver, to use a pop culture
Mhm.
reference. And I love that. And I think that having an older dad was a benefit to me. I learned a lot from him. And I just try to go back on those teachings of my parents and just try to never give up, and as a performing artist and as an actor, as an entertainer, as a creator, content creator, that door always slams shut in your face and you have to get used to it. And it's like for every 30 times that door closes on a path for you, another door creaks open and gives you an opportunity. So I think that's what I've taken advantage of in the past is those opportunities when I see a door opening. I never expected myself to get involved in morning radio and become a producer of a morning show. That was never on my radar, and it just sort of presented itself in a very odd way, and I took advantage of it. And I tried to see where it took me, and it landed for a very long time doing morning radio and comedy in the morning.
Well, I think that's always a great approach if you can do it. And, it takes a certain level of discipline, patience, certainly faith to just go along that path and look for the opportunities and then step into them. So is
Mm.
that where Nick the guy came from?
Yeah, Nick the Guy was an interesting thing. So my whole life is all about Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I grew up. That was one of the things as a kid that presented me with a sense of purpose and morality, even as a child. The idea about people standing up for what's right, even against great odds, and overcoming momentous odds to for the greater good of other people. And that became sort of my mantra. And it was so funny. I remember when the prequel trilogy was coming out, and I had built a Star Wars stormtrooper costume. And I really wanted to get advance tickets to see this episode one that was coming out. So I contacted my favorite radio station because they were always doing crazy things in the morning. And I said to them, hey, I've got a Star Wars, like a stormtrooper costume. And I would be happy to do something for you in exchange for preview tickets to go see the new Star Wars film. And they got back to me and said, well, they're not giving out any preview tickets, but we would love to do something with you one morning. So my very first radio bit was meeting one of the producers in downtown Vancouver. And he helped me get kitted up as the stormtrooper. And we had like a microphone attached to my cell phone. And the first bit I ever did for morning radio was, what can a Star Wars stormtrooper get for free? So I went in to this Fairmont hotel, the Fairmont Hotel in Vancouver, which is a very posh hotel. And I walked up to the front desk and I was asking for a free room for Lord Vader. And of course, they called security on me. And I did something apparently I didn't even know I could do because, yeah, the other thing I did was I went to a Starbucks and asked to get a free frappuccino. And of course, I accrued a few free things that morning, and the listener response was phenomenal. And at the end of that morning, they said, "Hey, do you want to come back to the station with Frank, who was the producer that they sent out to collect me?" I said, "Sure." And we talked for a few hours, and they said, "You know what? You provide a great on-air sound. You are able to paint a picture through the way you describe things without being pedantic about it. It feels like we're right there with you in the moment. And that's a really hard thing for people to do. And you seem to do it naturally." And then we started saying, like, we need to give you a radio name. We'd like you to be a regular part of the morning show. And then it became, so your name is Nick. So you're like this. We want to, you're kind of like a guy who just is the every guy. He's just this guy that's down the street. He's like the guy next door. And then it came up like he's just Nick the Guy. And that just stuck. So that's where Nick the Guy came from. And it led to having my own TV show for a little while called The Nick the Guy Show, where I would do hidden camera type stuff as well. And it also led to me writing comedy and producing content for the morning show as I sort of went all along for the ride in my radio career, and even writing a few jingles and a few commercials, some copy for some of the sponsors of the radio station. So I became this ad copywriter and then a producer without really thinking about it.
That is an awesome story. So talk a little bit about some of the favorite things you've done over the years.
Oh my gosh. I think every time I work, it's a lot of fun. I've worked with a lot of celebrities as well. I've made good friends with people like Bruce Boxleitner, who I was his stunt double. I've stunt doubled people that I wish I didn't stunt double for. They have their own interesting characteristics. People like Steven Seagal, who's an interesting person. I've stunt doubled him. I've worked with people like Jerry O'Connell, who was a great guy to work with. A friend of mine is Alan Cumming, who does a lot of work in stage and stuff in New York. And but I mean, for me, I just love, oh, also too, I have to admit, one of my favorite things to do is I've been in about 14 different Air Bud movies. So I've appeared in the Air Bud franchise several times as different characters. And Rob Vince and Anna Roberts, who are the creators of the Air Bud franchise, and it was with Disney for a long time, they would hire me. They hired me originally. The first thing I ever did for them was playing the umpire in seventh inning fetch, the award-winning seventh inning fetch. And because I do professional improvisation as well. I'm a professional improviser with the Vancouver Theatre Sports League. I've done that for years. And so Rob and Anna had come to see a show, and I was playing one night, and then my agent called me for this audition for the umpire. And I did it, and I had a lot of fun with it and was hired. But they gave me this license to do whatever I wanted on the set. So I would just do stuff, and they would laugh, and they'd go, do this again or try something else. And I just throw out other things at them. And that led to me being, now having done over 14 different films of theirs. And a lot of the times I would come in, and there was one I think I did called Monkey Up, where I got to work with that monkey that was in The Hangover. Her name is Crystal. She's an interesting actor. She dresses herself. Very odd to watch a monkey change on set by herself. It's burned in my memory. But they hired me as this security guy named Phil, and it was just 2 lines. And I came onto set, and it was shooting in Victoria. And Rob came up to me and he said, "Hey, great to see you again." And I was like, "Yeah, good to see you." And he said, "Hey, it's just a really quick thing." And I said, "Hey, I've got this idea for this character. He pretends he's English, but he's actually from New Jersey." And Robert was like, "Oh my gosh, that's hilarious." So I turned a one-day thing just by suggesting that, and they thought it was so funny. And of course, John Ratzenberger was working on that show as well, and he thought I was hilarious. And I turned into like 7 days work on this film for me because they kept writing new scenes for me to be in as Phil. So I love the fact that speaking up and doing something and trusting that intuition has led to expanded work opportunities for me. And I think a great example, I did a commercial, I think it was in the rural US that it aired. It was for Cox Communication. And they did this ad, and it was about a woman. The feature, the way it was written, it was for this mom who was doing all these things, and she just wanted to consolidate her cable, and of course Cox Communication, and they had this whole thing. And it was about saving money. And I was just SOC, which is silent on camera in this commercial. And my whole shtick was like, she's yelling at me to, come back to the van, and I'm on the beach with a metal detector. And I'm looking on the beach, and I've got the bucket hat on, and looking like this sort of like sad, middle-aged dad, like trying to find something on the beach with his metal detector. And one of the takes, and I just did it because I thought it would be funny, is like she was calling me to come back, to the van, and it was on a long shot. So they were shooting it on a long lens, and I just reached down and I put my hand up and I said, "I found a quarter." And then they stopped production for a good 45 minutes, and then they had all these cameras on me on the beach, shooting me on the beach, like, and then saying the line, "I found a quarter." And a few weeks later, I got called into voiceover a session, and they had recut the commercial based on my improvised line. So I had to do a narration going like, "As a provider of the family, I'm on the hunt. I'm doing all this stuff." And then it's me going, "I found the quarter." And then so unfortunately, the woman who was playing my wife, we were from the same agency, and her thing got cut down to basically SOC. I became the feature of this ad campaign, but I didn't try to do it. I just thought, oh, this will be a fun thing to throw out. So it was using that impulse in a positive way. I mean, I didn't throw them off. I didn't make them stop and listen to what I had to say. I just threw something in because that's what you do as an improviser, and it paid off. So in those few situations, both with the Nick the Guy phenomenon that I had up here in this area, and doing these like little improvisations on set or even on a commercial shoot, led to me actually doing some pretty fun things. So I think that's always fun when I'm allowed to play and when people actually let me offer things creatively. That's where I think I really excel. Like, trust me, I'm going to work with your brand. I'm going to do this. We're going to have a lot of fun, but trust, this weird, quirky instinct that I can offer you that perhaps a writer hasn't thought of or anything like this as well. And the same thing happened when I did a commercial for Mio MasterCard, where I played a 50s style black and white cowboy. And my whole thing was talking to a cat. And these are things you can find. I think you can find them on YouTube still, the Mio MasterCard. And it was just fun things like that, where, just embracing the absurdity, but treating it as it's real seems to resonate and makes things even more humorous to the people that are digesting the content or consuming the content. And it makes them remember those things. It's that little tiny thing that's a little quirky that sticks with people and that makes them remember whatever it is that I'm promoting or that I'm working for to make them to remember. And I have a lot of fun doing that. So I think for me, my funnest times, my most memorable times are when I can actually get to play with other people as opposed to just hitting my marks, saying my lines, and then just moving on. It's fun to bring that personality to what you do and allow that. And I think that resonates with viewers when they see a genuine connection as opposed to someone who's just memorized a script.
No, I agree with that. We call it shaking and baking around here.
Right.
And we do it in
Okay.
our business all the time because, you're sitting with a client, they maybe have an opportunity that they want to talk to you about, or maybe they have a challenge, new competitor, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, and the art of listening really comes into play because you're listening, and then you got to kind of play on your experience and your expertise to really on the run come up with ideas that might work for them. Well, what would you think if we did this? Or, we could probably help you with that. And for us, it's kind of a win-win because we're going to come up with ideas. And if they're good ideas, the client's going to fund them, which means it's
Mm-hmm.
going to help their business. It's going to help their branding and marketing. Plus, it's going to help us because it's going to generate revenue. So, yeah, we call it shaking and baking. And, we
That's,
try to do it all the time.
I love that term. We call it riffing, just riffing with an idea, just you riff
Riffing.
on it.
Got to
Yeah.
remember that one. So you've been on the camera side of commercials. You've also been on the creative side and the production
Mm-hmm.
side of commercials. Which do you like the best?
Oh, that's a good question. I both of them offer such a different aspect, but they're so important and they're mutually interchangeable with each other because if you get a good writer or a good concept and you have good talent that can bring it to life, it's amazing to watch what can happen. So, I mean, there are times when I love writing and watching my stuff that I've written be performed. And then there's times where I love being able to take something that's been written and give it life. So I don't know. I think I don't know what to say. I think I love both of them. I mean, it sounds like such a, I'm equivocating the answer, but really they both offer different challenges and I love both of those challenges. I love being able to create with a script, but I also love to create with a performance. So I think I don't know. It would depend on the project. If it's
Oh,
and there's certain things too. Like I'd have to say that I've turned down things, and I've turned down, and this is an important a note that I always give to my student actors that I teach. That it's okay to say no to something if it compromises your values or what you believe in. There are certain things that I'll tell my agent, I don't want that. I don't want to go out for that. That's not how I want to market myself. So I prefer to be viewed as more of a family style entertainer as opposed to someone who does more dark and brooding content when I'm performing. And there's just certain things I won't touch. Like I had, there was someone had written this show, and it was for a horror movie that's being shot right now, and they wanted me to play the guy who is murdered, but he's a serial killer, and then he's possessing some other kid to murder for him in the afterlife. And I was like, no, not interested. I don't want any part of that. I'd rather have a monkey hit me on the head and have me knock over things while chaos reigns with a dog driving a car. To me, that's more fun because I'm presenting my values to, in these situations, impressionable people. And I like them to think of me as sort of a lovable goof as opposed to a serious, conflicted character. And I think it's important to have those roles, but I think it's important for people to know their strengths and their weaknesses. And I'd rather embrace a role and be fully invested in it than playing a role where I'm commenting on that I don't like the role I'm playing.
Yeah, well, I think being able to say no is important, and actually saying no is good marketing.
It
Because you're
is.
you're true to yourself, you're true to your brand, true to your company, and the truth of the matter is, it's not always going to be a good fit. And
No,
so
totally.
sometimes you got to say no to be able to say yes to something else. So how do you find work? How do you get your work?
Well, I have an agent for a lot of the film and TV stuff that I do, which is great. And then I also have just connections. I was telling you before we started recording, I have a longtime friend of mine that we used to do way back in the day. We did murder mysteries together. And of course, I had worked for Disney. And one of the things that, as part of my Disney training, was creating that full image. So that look from when you're in front of an audience, you are on and you are in character. So the way you look, the way you present yourself, you are that character. And then behind the scenes, that's when you can take off the mask and let it all. So this guy was really interested in how I approach doing these murder mysteries. And I was telling him, well, it's part of the Disney training. You just need to be the character. And then I was embellishing my costumes to make them more accurate because that was another thing. I have this whole thing about making things look as accurate or as in world as possible. And he really liked that. So he ended up creating his own company. And then he was doing more of this corporate entertainment for conferences and things. And we were doing a lot of stuff with RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because a lot of Americans that come up to Canada, they want to see a Mountie. And so we would portray these Mounties at these conventions and these conferences. I didn't like it because for me, it was impersonating a police officer. And I didn't like the idea that, there's legalities too as well. If you're, outside of a private area and you're wearing a official police uniform, it is just, I didn't like the legal ramifications of it. And said to Mike, I said, you know what? I can create characters that can be just as much of as a photo op as an RCMP character. And I created these wilderness rangers, and I'll have to send you pictures of them so you can see these as well for yourself. But they're, very 1950s. They have the Stetson hats. They have the blazers, the long boots, and in a very 50s vibe where we can be anywhere because they're not a current uniform for anyone, but we look very photogenic in this approach, like what you'd imagine if you were traveling through Yosemite Park in say 1940. You might see a ranger like this, or in the 50s, and people love getting photos with them. And the great thing about it was when we had these conferences, there's some people that are afraid of a police presence, so they shy away from when they think you are a police officer or you're law enforcement. But when you're a wilderness ranger, you can engage with these people and these clients in a much more diverse way. And you can talk about, the bears and salmon, and you can actually then work with indigenous people and talk about the environment, whatever it is the client is looking for. And they're much more malleable because they're not just this law enforcement presence. Because we would get people asking for, can you get a picture of you arresting me or putting me in handcuffs? And to me, and again, it's like, it's funny in the moment, but that's the kind of image that has a long-term presence online. And I'd rather have an opportunity where people can get a very squeaky clean image where there's nothing like that happening, but it's something that they want to share and they had a good time with us. And so I created these Mountie uniform or these wilderness uniforms. And now they're his biggest seller. And he now turns down and he re-educates clients when they go, we want a mount. He's like, well, we have the Wilderness Rangers. And he's learned to say no to the RCMP just from all the other ramifications that can happen, but also making these characters much more engaging to clients. And I'll send you this off. You can see them yourself, and the people listening will just have to imagine. But it turned out really well. But that's part of my Disney experience of being able to create a complete look, a complete character dossier that is very friendly to all aspects, but it provides a very broad, accepting image. And it's great because people want it, and it's become so marketable for him.
So what kind of things did you do for Disney, or what kind of things have you done for Disney?
Well, back in the day, of course, like I did the working with the Airbud films were for Disney Pictures, so I did all those. But my first start with Disney was way back when I was a wee lad, and it was working in Disneyland when it was only one park, and I was good friends with a character known as Goofy, and I was good friends with a character known as Merlin. So there was the Sword and the Stone show, and there was the roaming character of Goofy. And both of those characters I was good friends with. So I had a lot of fun in the parks, engaging with people, and I learned a lot. I've written about it. I've written about the experience of when you're a mascot character and you're encased and they can't see your face. And it's amazing because so many different people come to Disneyland, oftentimes, or to Disney World. A lot of families come once in their life. Maybe that's the one trip because it gets expensive for an average person to go, or an average family. So you encounter quite a spread of the reasons people are going to the parks. So I found out very early on when I was just, 19, 18, 19 years old, that people were coming, and you learn things about these guests, and a lot of them going through critical illnesses, or their children are going to, this is their last trip before they essentially pass on, and they wanted to give them this trip of a lifetime. And especially like Make-A-Wish Foundation,
Mhm.
places like that would come. And I do a lot of work with Make-A-Wish Foundation now. I love doing charity work, and I love working with companies like that. It's amazing. So I learned just the attraction of Disney, and a lot of people have things to say about Disney as a corporation. I honestly think my experience working for the Mouse really helped me as a performer, as a person, as a marketer, as a content creator, because I got to see how it's that extra level of detail that Disney really influences other companies with. And it's so funny because I did a movie years ago called Charlie's Angels Behind the Camera, where I got to play Michael Eisner. So I've actually played Michael Eisner on camera. And it's just so funny that I got to play him. But I've loved what Disney gave me. And it gave me that opportunity to really believe in yourself. And a lot of cast members are taught that every guest has to be treated the same. However, they encourage you to create magic moments for people. So it's kind of this conflicting guidance. And some people run with it, and you find cast members that are amazing at having these special encounters or moments of magic with guests. And then other cast members, maybe they don't have that necessarily that in them. They're good, but they don't have it. And that's why some cast members stand out. And I think that's the one thing that really helped me as a young performer. And I did that before I went over to England and trained as an actor. And it just gave me this whole great opportunity to learn about the importance of engagement, not as a self-indulgent actor, but as a giving creator or performer with other people, and allowing these people to feel that they've been personally touched or had a very special moment with the character. And I think that is something that stays with you. And I'm sure you might have had some of that when you were at Disneyland for those 2 days that I know that you were there for, that there was probably some moments going, that's a great cast member. I love that interaction. And it sticks with you. And if you have a negative experience, unfortunately, as human beings, we tend to be wired to go with that negative interaction. Oh, it's terrible. They overcharged me on this, or I didn't like the way that cast member said this. But it's those moments that really resonate with you that a lot of people don't even talk about. Like, we're quick to judge, but it takes us more to actually just go, hey, you know what? I want to speak out on what was great about this. And I think that's something our society as a whole needs to do more of, is embracing the positive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've never heard it expressed that way, but of course Disney's world renowned for particularly their customer service and the
Mm-hmm.
experience, but you phrased it as the extra level of detail, and I've never thought about it that way, but it makes all the
Mm-hmm.
sense in the world. They just take everything up a notch over the expected, the norm. They just do it better.
They do. Yeah. I do think that COVID, of course, hit so many different companies when we had the shutdowns happening. And I think Disney was hit as well. I think it's taking time, but they're gradually getting back to where they were. But of course, losing a lot of people, a lot of people walked away from a lot of companies during COVID and tried to do different things and started different careers. But they're getting back on track. But it does take time. And I think a lot of people don't really understand the importance of, there's an old cliche of, it takes money to make money. And to a degree, I agree with that, in the sense that it's how you present yourself, or how you, again, like that extra level of detail that makes the difference. Like, just having that one little extra thing that makes you stand above your competitor. And if you go to any theme parks, I mean, Universal's getting really good at catching up with Disney. I will give them that. But there's certain theme parks, or entertainment companies that almost go there, but then of course they think about their budget and they pull back on one little thing, and that can make a whole difference. We see it in restaurants, we see it in bars, we see it in stores, and the way that it's presented, it's all about the packaging. It's very interesting how I can go to different places and find the same product marketed under a different label and get whatever I want. But if you market it in a way that makes me want to go with you, and it can be like, oh, just the way it's wrapped differently, or it's got a unique, different detail that stands out, or the logo, even something as simple as the brand or the logo, will make me want to go with that brand over a different brand, just the way it even is stamped on whatever it is I'm buying. And it's so funny how we think about the aesthetic without thinking about the aesthetic. And I think as creators and as marketers, we need to be very aware that we need to know that our audience, or our possible clients, they are going to be looking in the areas that we are trying to get them not to look at. So the art of misdirection is almost everywhere. And that's what I love about Disney. Like, when you're waiting in a queue, the entire queue is part of the experience. Whereas in other theme parks, it's a queue. You see the scaffolding, you see the disgruntled, employees who are getting heat stroke. But you have at Disney, it's like, oh, I'm actually going inside a mountain, or I'm getting this constant reminder that I'm being taken away to a new experience. And I'll be willing to wait 90 minutes for that 3-minute ride. And if you can sustain interest to get on that ride that's only 2 or 3 minutes long, and have them wait 60 minutes, or do their fast pass where they come back 2 hours later to experience that 3-minute ride, you're doing a good job.
I agree. That extra level of detail.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could continue to visit all day. I want to be sensitive to your time. Focus of our podcast is marketing, and there's been so many marketing threads throughout our conversation. The other part is rural America, and I know you've had some experience with it, but when I say those words, what does that mean to you?
Well, I do think, to me, and of course, I have the benefit of living in Canada and coming back and forth to the United States. And I do think that rural Canada is a lot like rural America. And I think that outside of the big cities, where people can get lost in the skyscrapers and the towers, and there's so much sensory overload in the big city. And because of that, the people that work there or that are centered there tend to really think more about themselves or inwardly, and they lose the bigger picture. So when I think about the expansiveness, like from, going from New York to LA and that spread in between, I think about the average person or the markets or the groups of people that are all spread out in that area. They are the heart of what that country is about. You're not going to find the same degree, and I'm definitely paraphrasing here and generalizing, but you're not going to find the same degree of that sense of welcome and value in the big cities because they're very internationally based. It's very cosmopolitan, it's very sensory overloading. But it's in those small towns where you get the vibe of where people's morals are, like what matters. And it's that idea of neighbors helping neighbors, despite whatever political or religious views you have. If someone's in need, someone, reaches out, you've got a community there to help them. And I love it when I see the idea of people setting aside differences and coming together for the good of the community. And I think we get overloaded on social media and television with this polarization. And it almost seems to be forced upon people, like you must take a side, but you don't have to. You and I can have a conversation and we might have different views, but we can connect as human beings. And I think that's what I think about rural America. It's about that human connection, and I think that to me is something that I would love to see more of across the cities and just all around. So when I think of rural America, I think about that. I think about that. It's like the heartbeat,
Hear, hear. That's great insight. I appreciate that. It's interesting because, that rural America or even rural Canada, rural means different things to different people. And I think you expressed it very well. Hey, Nick, I've really enjoyed visiting. What else would you like to share with our Outdrive audience today?
Boy, oh boy. I think if anything is just, and might sound a little odd, but I think I'd love to share that the more we don't take ourselves seriously, the more serious fun we can have. And I think that's something that's really important, that, life is short. Life as we know it is short. And I think that's allowing ourselves to have those experiences. Like, again, how I met you, that was a great connection. And I think if we did that once or twice a day or a month, imagine how much better the place would be. It's like, so not take ourselves too seriously, and we all are important people and everyone we meet is important. And I think we just have to keep on going with that. So I think that would be one thing.
I love that. I love that. Nick, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, Cliff, thank you for having me.
Hey, folks, thanks for listening to Outdrive. I hope you've enjoyed our visit today with Dr. Nicholas Harrison, Nick the Guy. Come back again next week and I'll take you down the roads of rural America where it's heaven on earth.
Thanks for taking a ride with us on Outdrive. This episode is complete, so head on over to ecalis.com for more insight you can apply to help drive your business growth. And be sure to sign up for our free monthly e-letter, Outthink, for even more helpful content about marketing to rural America. Have a great day and keep on driving.